We put our identity in everything else besides God. We put our identity in maybe another person. We put our identity in maybe some lies we tell ourselves, negative things that people tell to us. We put our identity maybe in a job or what's in our bank account. But today, the vision for today is, I want us to all know that our identity should be in Christ. Amen. That God is the one who gives our identity. He's the one who gives us our significance. And so if you don't hear anything as Pastor Jesse and I speak today, I want you guys to know, like we've been talking about in our Young Adults Life group, is that number one, in God's eyes, you're acceptable, that you're valuable, that you're lovable, that you're forgivable, and you're capable. God says all these things about each and every one of you guys. And so if you get nothing out of today, I want you to know those things and know that you are loved by God. And no matter what people say to you or about you, you are all those things to God. And so we're going to get started. Before we get started, I'm going to let Pastor Jesse introduce himself.
I'm Jesse. We good? Can you hear me? Yes. Is this right? Good. Yes. All right, so I'm a small town kid. I grew up in a town in the middle of nowhere, Carlsbad, New Mexico. And if you don't know what Carlsbad is, it's known for one of the world's biggest holes in the ground, literally. They call it the Carlsbad Caverns, but it's literally just a big hole in the ground. And so that kind of sums up where I'm from. I grew up in a home that was less than perfect for sure. When I was, I think, 11 years old, getting my years mixed up, my parents divorced when I was 12. My dad went to prison. And my dad was on and off drugs his whole life. So I spent a lot of time just trying to figure out who I was, you know. And so that's what we're talking about tonight resonates with me because of where I came from and where God brought me from, and then where I am today is, man, like I still go home and people are like, wait, you do what? Like, no, that doesn't make sense, you know, like they don't get it, you know what I'm saying? And they're still doing the Carlsbad thing and they just don't understand. What they don't understand is that God got a hold of me. So that's the part that they struggle understanding. So we just one mic.
Until they get ready. But for you, we'll make sure we have 2 microphones working. You're that special. And I like my job, so I'm gonna make sure. But really, before we get into it, number one, I want you to be ready, because last time I interviewed, had a conversation with somebody, their chair broke and they fell on the ground. Yeah. Okay.
I checked the chairs.
Okay. Good. Okay. So the first question, I'm gonna hop right into it.
Okay.
We all know that what identity is, but a lot of us love God, or maybe don't love God, or never had a relationship with God. But in your life, have you ever questioned God's identity, or not realized, or thought something was not true about Him? If so, what brought you back to the truth?
If you'll allow me for a minute, I want to establish a baseline, at least for me. All right, so I'm going to talk to you, but understand as I'm talking to you, really this is just something that I had to establish, really just for me, as we were kind of getting ready for tonight. You know, one of the things that he said is we really want you just to talk just really unfiltered. And that's great for me because I'm like anti-filters. Like if you're with me and like you take a picture and you tell me how beautiful it is and then you start putting filters on it, there's a good chance I'm gonna make fun of you. All right, so that's just gonna, I mean, just so you, that's just kind of how I am. I got a big argument with one of my great friends about a month ago because he took a picture of the sunset and it was unbelievable. Like, I mean, it was like, I'd never seen a sunset like it before, and I've seen some amazing sunsets. And so he immediately started putting a filter on it, and I was like, dude, you just literally made that like number 30 on my list of great sunsets. And he's like, why? I said, because it's not original, it's not real. And he's like, name a great picture that doesn't have a filter on it these days. I'm like, well, look at my Instagram. I never put a filter ever. Like, I'm anti-filters. Like, I got pictures of my wife on there. You better not say that it's not great when you have a filter. You know? So we had these conversations. So, but I did do like a little bit, and so I just wrote down some notes. I really just want to speak from my heart, but there was it in me. I wanted to establish for me when we're talking about identity, really kind of what we're talking about. And so I want to just share just a couple of thoughts on that, and then I want to answer that first question. I believe that identity relates to our basic values, and those values dictate our behaviors. You understand? So who I am should be greater than what I do. Who I am should actually drive what I do. And so when we talk about this thing of identity and who we are and those kind of things, I don't want to be remembered as a pastor. Now that is what I do, but what I want to be remembered for is somebody who really loved people and really loved Jesus. Like I want to be remembered for more substance than just what I do. And so what I see, a lot of times we get lost in our identity because we reverse those things. We determine who we are by what we do instead of determining what we do by who we are. You understand what I'm saying? And so when we don't have a grasp of really what we value, what is meaningful to me on the inside, when we don't start with that as the basis, I think that people start trusting in two things. Number one, they start trusting in their feelings. And let me just tell you on the front end as we talk about identity, your feelings will lie to you. They will absolutely lie to you. When is the last time you stayed up worried about something that was literally physically and just emotionally overwhelming you to find out that it never even happened? Right? Your feelings aren't always true. Feelings are a beautiful thing. They're a wonderful thing. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have feelings. What I am saying is there has to be a truth in you that's bigger than those feelings. But I think the second thing we start depending on, especially in our culture today, and it goes back to the filter thing that we're talking about being unfiltered, is when we don't see things working like they should, we try to fix our facade. We try to fix the way that people view us, the way that people see us, the way that my Facebook looks, the way my Instagram looks. And what we say is like, I want to be like that. And so instead of doing what they did, we just want to look how they look. We want to come across the way they come across. And so when we get down to the identity question, here's what I think. Here's what I think. And this is kind of my little one-liner that I wrote down. We can either trust our feelings, our facade, or our Heavenly Father. Because what changed for me, and we'll talk some more about this as we get into the question, what changed everything for me is when I began to realize that I'm a child of God. That I'm His. My value, my worth, who I am, it comes from Him. It emanates out of Him. Friends, that was a game changer for everything. But then you get into the question, and this is where kind of the rubber meets the road. Have you ever questioned God's identity, that He is who He says He is, right? Or, and if yes, how did you get back to the truth? For me, and I'm just going to speak for me, I know that people wrestle with this. I never questioned who God was. I questioned who God said I was. So I was never a question, was God awesome? I believe God is awesome. Even when things are hard, my leaning is not, is God awesome? It's that, like me, for real, like I'm like the guys in Carlsbad when I go back home that are like, you ain't a pastor, dude. I mean, like, that doesn't even make sense, you know? Like, you don't hardly even talk, you know? Like, how do you get up in front of people and talk? And so, my questions have always been more aimed at, am I who He says that I am? You know, that's getting kind of my deal. And I will say that we talk about how do you get back to the truth. My life began to change significantly when I became confident not in who I am, but in who I was becoming. So I became more confident in the journey than I did the destination. Because for me, I wanted to wake up and be like good. You know what I'm saying? Like I want to be like, take a selfie and 1,000 people like it. You know what I mean? But what I didn't realize is that for people that arrived to that place, they did a whole lot to get to that place. And so I just became more and more confident, and I'm still in that journey, right? I haven't arrived. I hope I haven't arrived. I think I'm still young, even though y'all don't. So I'm still working on that, but what I'm confident of today is not so much who I am, but I'm confident in who I'm becoming, because I've seen God do so many amazing things in my life.
let me piggyback off that real quick. As just a second question. You said you focus on who you're becoming, the journey of that. What about for anyone in here who's become, maybe they decided to have a relationship with God, they've changed, they're a whole different person. People in their past may not recognize them anymore because they're living for God. They're trying their best to be everything that God called them to be. So, how does someone talk to a friend or a family member and let them know that they've changed and they're not the same person anymore? And should they still be around those same people who don't believe that they're changing or not willing to let them be who God's called them to be?
It's a good question. I think that, when I first got saved, I wanted to preach to everybody, and nobody listened. And I think my frustration began that I felt like it was me against them. You know what I'm saying? And some of that was my immaturity in my faith, that I didn't realize that the grace of God got hold of me, but the grace of God hadn't got hold of them. The same light that hit me hadn't hit them. And God has called me to be a light in dark places. He's called me to be the salt of the earth. And so salt is a preservation. Salt provides flavor where there is no flavor. And so, my job wasn't necessarily to change their view of me. My job wasn't so that they could see that God is the ultimate supreme being. My job is very simple, is to live for God and love them. Where I think we get messed up is that we put too much pressure on ourselves sometimes as believers. Our job is to connect with people and to love them. It's God's job to change them. Right? And so you can look at me and you can have an image of me, but that's okay. My image is no longer skewed by what you see, because I know who God sees. You know what I'm saying? Like good for you for having the vision you have. But right now I'm about God. So I just go home. I learn to go home with confidence, knowing that these people don't even know. Like, you got no idea. But here's the thing. Like, I'm going to treat you so differently now. Like, even when you're talking weird, I'm going to treat you so different that eventually you're going to be like, wow, that is, like, you can't deny that it's different. So it's easy to get that me against you, us against the world. And then it transitions. Like, so here's the next step. I somehow felt better than them. You know what I'm saying? Like, oh, well, I'm a Christian. I don't do those things. I don't say those things. And it's like somehow I got better, but I never got better. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't about me being good. It was about God being good. And so you can almost become like this, like, I'm a superior person now. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, is that answer the question? Did I answer it or not really?
And so it's good? Thank you, Roy. Maybe, there we go.
There we go. Look at you.
I don't think they just want to hear me talk back there. I think they're tired.
That's
probably why.
Yeah, my wife wishes she had a mute button sometimes, so there's that.
And so, going kind of off that question, like when we form our identity, and sometimes we get our identity wrapped up in maybe our job, what God's called us to do. And the thing is, God's called us to reach the lost, to be a light, to be salt and light of the earth, to preach His word. But the vehicle is always different. And the vehicle that God chose for you is to be a pastor. And I know for that could be a hard calling, something you may not want to. Some of you guys know my story is, I grew up in this church, and right across the street, I sat there, and the pastor at the time told me we're supposed to ask God what He wants us to be. And I said, I'll be anything except a pastor. And then look what God's doing now.
Look at you now.
And to be honest, I was frustrated at God for a while. Because that's not something that I wanted to be. But then He showed me that was just a vehicle to do what He's called us to do. I know a lot of people maybe struggle with the job they may have right now and thinking that's their identity wrapped in that. And it's hard. You may not want to quit. You may want to quit that. So basically my question when it comes to that is, have you ever wanted to quit your calling or quit being a pastor, even though your calling, this is just a vehicle to live out your calling?
So I've probably quit being a pastor, I don't know, maybe like 50 Sundays or something. after we got done with church, and I feel like it went good. The thing is I just keep showing back up on Monday. So like I quit and then I start again. So, you know, being a pastor for me I think that I'm different, and maybe I'm not different, but I feel like when I talk to people, I feel different because I think I always knew what I was supposed to do, but I wrestled real hard over whether or not I would do it. You know, so like when I was a little kid, I'll tell you, so there was a short period of time when I was a little kid that we actually did go to church. And man, it was an amazing time in my life. And I remember that God really did some things in my family then. And this was when I was real little. And so we would walk to church, and then we would walk home. And I would get all the kids in the neighborhood. We had like a Dennis the Menace neighborhood. All the kids were always getting in trouble together. But I would sit them in rows, and I would stand up on a milk crate. Y'all know what a milk crate is? You know what I'm talking about? So I'd stand up on the milk crate, and I'd have all of them sit down, and I would tell them what I learned in children's church, even as like a little kid. And so I would preach to them whatever was preached to me, and I'm sure it was terrible. And then my mom would come outside, and she would bust me, and then I would just sit down real quick. Like I wasn't doing anything, but I had everybody lined up in rows. You know what I'm saying? So like, they're sitting in rows looking at me, and I'm sitting on a boat, like nothing's going on here. Like this is, so I was kind of new what I was supposed to do, but I really wrestled with whether or not I was going to be obedient to do that. And there's a long story as to how that wrestling went, how it looked like, but the question is, have you ever wanted to quit? A lot of times. But here's the deal. I'm called to God before I'm called to be a pastor. And it goes back to what I said in the beginning, is I think sometimes we think we're called to do before we're called to be. And if you don't get the be right, you won't get the do right. You know what I'm saying? So I was talking to Autumn even before this, and I asked her how her day went. Now, she's a teacher. And so I was like, well, how'd your day go? And she's like, man, those kids were just hilarious today. And what I gathered out of what she told me is that she really loves those kids. Well, loving kids is different than teaching kids. But here's what I'll tell you. If you love kids, you'll be really good at teaching kids. And so if you ask me, is Autumn a great teacher? I don't know. But here's what I can tell you. She loves kids, so probably she is. Right? And so the difference she'll make because there's something in her, you know, it's a big difference when somebody shows up. Like remember when we first had lunch, where we Saltgrass? Okay, so one of the things that I love that you told me, here's what you learned. Here's what you told me you learned. Because you were doing some motivational speaking at that time. Like you were talking to some like students and stuff like that. And you said motivational speaking isn't enough. I have to be able to include God in the equation. I got to be able to include God in the equation. Like you learned that just the information or the do, that's not enough. That's not enough. And that's where I think a lot of people get hung up. So the reason I keep showing back up is because even when I'm frustrated at what I do, I'm not frustrated at who I am. I'm still in love with Jesus, man. And he's got me. So it's like, Sunday, man, that didn't go good. Like I didn't preach good. People didn't even show up. They were lazy, didn't come out because it was raining. I put in the same work this week as I did last week, and it rained and nobody came. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, forget it. Dude, I'm going to find something else to do. You know what I'm saying? I just real. Like, that's how I'm built there. Like, people want to know, like, what's going on in your head when you're up there. I'm like, did I say something offensive? Why is that person leaving? Why are they walking out of the service right now? So I'm getting all insecure. I get home on Sunday, and I'm like, man, forget this. Like, I'm an introvert anyway. Like, I'm exhausted. I'm done. I'm tired. What the world's going on? And then after I get through all that, I'm like, what in the world am I crying about, dude? God's got me, you know? So it kind of goes back to I understand who I am. You know what I'm saying? I understand who I am. So if he's got me, I'm good. I'm good. I show back up on Monday and we get back to work. You know?
It's good. And I just say you know who you are. A lot of people say you know who you are, but you know you're not perfect. And as a pastor, as someone who claims to be a Christian, people expect us to be perfect all the time. They expect us to not make a mistake. They're always watching us. And sometimes I feel like if we profess our faith publicly, some people are waiting for us to mess up and say, they're really not a Christian. So how do you navigate being a pastor or just being someone who calls himself a follower of God, a Christian, how do you navigate living a life where people are expecting to be perfect and that's not the reality of it?
I don't take myself that serious. I mean, just being honest, I think my staff would tell you I joke around all the time. And I don't joke around in the sense that, like, just to avoid reality. I just legitimately don't take myself that serious. Like, it's really weird for me still, like, sitting up here and having people look at me. I'm like something going on back, you know. And so, like, maybe it just, you know, my personality, where I came from a very rough environment. And when we talk about, like, people want you to be perfect, and then people want you to be decent, you know, and just learn how to function in society. So, like, that's the normal standard for most people. It's just like, you know, like for my kid, I'm like, hey, did you have a good day? And he's like, I didn't hit, I didn't spit, I didn't throw things, you know. Like, that's his definition of a good day, and that's kind of like the standard. Like, hey, how were you today? I was good. I didn't punch the person next to me. It was a great day, you know. I didn't kill anybody. I didn't cuss anybody out, you know. So, like, then there's like this, just like being a decent person. The environment I grew up in was like maybe 10 notches below that. You know what I'm saying? Like, we didn't care if, like, we were just kind of out for our own, you know, in my family that I grew up in. And so, you know, from that standpoint for me, talking about, you know, just my sort of journey, is I don't take myself that serious, and I just don't carry that pressure, and I try not to put that pressure on my kids. And sometimes that's hard. Sometimes that's hard because, you know, people see my kids act a certain way or do a certain thing, and I know that people have their opinions and their views and all that kind of stuff, and that's all great and fine, and they're allowed to have those, but it doesn't mean I have to own them. You know, just because they own them doesn't mean I got to. So I'm not trying to be perfect. I'm not trying to be famous. I'm not trying to be well known. And I think when you have that perspective, that isn't what you're trying to accomplish, it really takes the weight off. Because here's the deal, I don't expect anyone else in this room to be perfect. And so hopefully, you know, God sees that and he smiles on that. My goal is this. My goal is not to be perfect, it's just to grow. That's it. Just keep growing. Get a little bit better tomorrow.
And I think God expects the same thing. He doesn't expect us to be perfect. He expects us to grow through life. With a lot of us, we can seek perfection, but God just wants progression. He wants us to just get better and better each and every day.
That's good.
You mentioned your kids, and some people, they may, like, I really saw a picture of your kids. Do you think you and your kids look alike?
I think that if we had the same color skin, nobody would question who my kids are. But we don't, so sometimes people question that.
And so with that, when you have people assume that, oh, you may not be able to shape your kid's identity, maybe it's just because they look different.
Right.
You find it harder to shape other people or your kid's identity, knowing that they're adopted and they look different from you. You find that harder.
You want to hear a funny story?
Of course.
Okay, so because we're doing, like, I'm supposed to be just hanging out tonight. So I told this one time on a Sunday, but it's so absolutely true. So as a parent, like, you always try to find things to do with your kids, right? So you want to take them to do stuff. So an easy, free thing, especially in Plano, we have a ton of parks. So I take them to the parks and just let them run. If you know my kids, dude, they're go like 100 miles an hour. Like, our home is only quiet when they're asleep. You know what I'm saying? So and so they're always wrestling and running and playing and stuff. And so I don't think much of it anymore because, like, it's just life for us. It's just like, you know, when you're just living life, sometimes you don't even notice, like, that something's different, you know. And so I take them to the park and let them play, and I noticed this pattern developing. And this was right after we brought our first son home, and I just let him play. So I'm sitting, like, on the park bench, you know, I'd be working on a sermon on my phone, or, you know, I play with them sometimes. But if there's other kids there, they really play with the other kids. And so they're just kind of running around playing. And inevitably, there's always the parent there that starts watching my kids, like, real intensely, like, looking at them, and then they start looking around, and you can just see unfold on their face, like, why is this kid who's like 4 years old at the park by themselves? You know what I'm saying? Because they don't recognize immediately that, like, oh, that could possibly be their dad. You know what I'm saying? Because we don't have the same complexion skin. So, and so it leaves with just one other option for me. So if I don't have a kid at the park, I'm like this creepy dude sitting over here on the bench watching kids play. And so I used to say something, I used to just be like, oh, those are my kids. As soon as I saw the look, I'd be like, those are my kids. But then I found it more fun not to say anything and just let the whole thing unfold. You know what I'm saying? So I just let it all unfold. And eventually what happens is that one of my kids will they want to drink water, or they want me to come play with them, or you know what I mean, something will happen. And so it's really fun to watch it come full circle, because then my kids are running around and they'll be like, hey dad! And I'm like, what's up buddy? And then you see that person who was so concerned that some deadbeat parent would leave their 4-year-old kid to play at the park all by themselves, goes, oh, then they feel almost bad, you know what I mean? I didn't even consider that as an option. So anyway, kind of funny how that works out. But is it bad that I don't say something? No. I don't know. It works out for me better that way. So here's the deal. Here's the thing: is that you have to establish kind of what you're trying to accomplish. I think that's the main thing. And so you ask the question, is it harder because I have kids that look different than me? I honestly can't answer that honestly, because I don't know any different. You know what I'm saying? I've never had kids that look like me. We chose to build our family a different way. We felt like God spoke that to us. We never tried to have biological kids. So my journey has always been this journey. This has always kind of been my road to go down. And so really what I've just tried to establish is, who do I want to be as a dad? And what is my job as a dad? What am I really trying to accomplish? And so I think first of all, I think parenting is just hard. So let's just kind of get that out there. Is it harder because of our situation? I have no idea. But I do know that my job is to help them learn how to get rid of their dependence upon me so that they can become dependent upon God. And that's a hard transition for them to make. I definitely see things differently, and I feel things differently because I've seen my kids treated differently than I was treated. And so I've experienced things because of my kids' skin color and see things. So I definitely have a different perspective, but I don't know if it's any harder. I don't have a reference point. You can pretend that you know, but until you're in the home with those kids and you're responsible for them, you have no idea.
With this question, I'll probably get a couple, 3, 4 more in, just try to get 3 or 4 more in, just for time's sake. What I've learned, whatever's the most important to us, will influence us the most, or wherever influences us the most will give us our identity. And we all know that you put your identity in Christ. What's something that influences you the most that's not Christ?
My wife.
Why?
Yeah, who you marry will determine more about your future than anything else naturally on this earth outside of Jesus. There was the two most dynamic moments for me is when I gave my life to Jesus. The second one was when I got filled with the Holy Spirit. Because if you were here a few weeks ago on Sunday, I said, I don't believe it's what you're made of that matters. Because we're all made of the same stuff. I believe it's what you're filled with. So when the Holy Spirit filled me, bro, that set me on fire. That gave me what I needed to go get what God told me to go get. You know what I'm saying? And so when I was filled with the Holy Spirit, that's a game changer. But dude, the third most amazing thing that's ever happened to me, and I can talk about this the rest of my life, is my wife. And so what I would say is, get that part. If you're already married, then we can talk about that. But if you ain't married, man, get that part right. Because life is awesome when you have someone awesome to spend it with every day. I grew up in a home, and I'll just give you insight. There was a night that I woke up to my dad throwing my mom out of my bedroom window. So when I talk about they fought, it wasn't like they argued. Me and my wife argued. We don't fight, man. It's awesome. So, yeah, most of what I am is because she is, so pretty cool.
Just while we're on that topic, when you enter marriage, some people may be scared of that because they're like, oh, my identity is going to change. I'm not going to be who I am anymore. I've fought this so hard this long to actually know who I am, and now I'm going to get married, and they're going to try to change so many things about me.
Right.
So, on your way to marriage, did you feel like your identity changed at all?
Here's the thing about marriage, is everybody thinks that like somehow marriage changes you. Marriage makes you more of what you already were. And so that's why it's so important that you marry well, because here's the thing, the things that I did poorly are under a magnifying glass, and they're highlighted, because it ain't just me seeing them, now somebody else sees them on a regular basis. And that's a challenge. People get into marriage and they think like I've seen this before where girls are like, oh, I know he's got all these problems, but you know, we just go so well together and I'm gonna change him. Girl, you ain't changing nobody. I'm just gonna tell you right now, you're just gonna get more of what you already see. So you better like what you see right now. Like, you better like it, because you're gonna get a lot more of it. So marriage is not like a change agent, it's a magnifying glass. I've learned that if God doesn't change somebody, then they probably ain't changing. Unless they really want to change. I mean, when you get married, like on the front end, like you'll do stuff, like you'll make sure that like you keep your sink clean, and that lasts like 2 weeks. Then you go back to who you were before you got married. You go back to your disciplines. You go back to your habits and your values, you know. And so like sometimes people are surprised by that. But here's the thing: is like my job. Here's my job: is to love my wife. It ain't to change her. And her job is to love me, it's not to change me. So, you know, so when we got married, here's the deal. We felt like two were better than one, and so the two of us together could go make a difference together. I think where it helped me is it didn't change me, it made me stronger. You know what I'm saying? So like, if I'm playing basketball, I get better because you're on my team, right? Or I get worse because you're on my team. Catch what I'm saying? But me and you together, we can do more. We can accomplish more. Well, it's the same in marriage. We felt like we wanted to live a life of purpose, and together, we can do more. We can live more. So,
with this is kind of a heavy question. Okay. But obviously, this past Sunday, we've all heard of Kobe Bryant in passing this past Sunday, and it's unexpectedly. No one expected. He did something he does almost every single day. So with that, him leaving us so early, why is it so important for us to put our identity in Christ? Because a lot of times we waste it. I'm gonna wild off for a couple more years. I'm young. I'm gonna still do this and this. I'm gonna have sex outside of marriage. I'm gonna drink. I'm gonna smoke. I'm gonna do drugs. I'm gonna not honor God. I'm not gonna have a relationship with God. I'll go to church. Once I get married, once I have kids, I'll go to church for my kids. But why is it important for us to have a relationship with God now and put our identity in Christ now?
Well, I would say, let me answer one thing that just came to my mind where you talk about that. You always reap what you sow. You know what I'm saying? So, like, start sowing good stuff now. Nobody wakes up an expert. Like, that doesn't happen. Like, you start investing now. Like, nobody wakes up a professional. Kobe Bryant didn't become one of the greatest players to ever play the game just because he woke up one day and was like, tomorrow I'm gonna start. He didn't do that. He started young and he kept building towards something. And what I would say to us is, when it comes to your walk with God, if you want to get somewhere, then you better start. Because you're not gonna wake up married and go, now I'm gonna get it. It don't work like that. You're gonna wake up and you're married and go, now I better start. So it's better just to start. It's better to get started now. But man, that hit me heavy. I don't normally, and I know it's like the way of the world, but I don't ever grieve on social media, but I wanted to. I mean, I watched that guy play, for 20 years. Literally, I hated him on the basketball court and respected the heck out of him at the same time watching him play. And then once he retired and he sort of kind of got into his mode of, just hanging out with family and stuff, and just kind of being happy with his kids. And I loved watching that. So I didn't believe it. I was watching my son play basketball, and somebody leaned over and was like, yo, Kobe Bryant just died. And I was like, I didn't see that on any major news network. I'm not believing it, So that kind of hit me a little bit funny. I don't know how it did for you guys, but when celebrities die, it doesn't always hit me funny. That one hit me a little funny. But here was the verse that just sort of stuck out to me. So like if I was gonna get on social media, but I just don't do that, because I think when I do that, then people expect me to do it about everything that impacts them. You know, and I don't want to spend my whole life grieving on social media because of somebody else got hit hard with it. I don't want to own their problem. You know, I have enough of my own. And so I think the thing that really stuck out to me is James chapter 4, verse 14. What is your life? You are a mist that appears for a little while, then vanishes. You know, and I just thought, and some of it hit me funny because we're like very close in age. We both have small kids. Do you know what I'm saying? And I was just like, oh, you know, I can't leave my wife like that. Like I've got to, God, help me. You know what I'm saying? Like I took it personal for a minute. So, you know, I think the thing that's so important is, man, we got to realize we're living for eternity. We're not living for tomorrow. Because here's the thing, you are promised eternity. You're not promised tomorrow. The promise that Kobe Bryant had, the promise that I have, the promise that they have, that you have, is eternity, not tomorrow. Our life here is but a vapor. It just lasts for a minute. You know, I saw somebody give an illustration one time, and I think this is so important. So, I'm gonna do something. I'm not taking off my clothes, first of all, let me just be clear, okay? But I want to show you something just real quick. So like, if this represented eternity, my belt, right? This represents eternity. Like our life only represents this much of it. You know what I'm saying? What we're living for is this over here, not this right here. And I think sometimes we get that messed up. You know, something like Kobe Bryant did, it just reminds you that, wow, like we are not promised tomorrow. And so, man, if you don't have Jesus, if you haven't discovered him, can I just tell you, life begins with God. Your life starts the day that you meet God. And if you want to find your identity, then find your Creator. You know, if I want to learn how something works best, I go to the instructions and I figure out the people that created it and I learn from them. If I want to put something together that's fallen apart and the pieces don't seem to be fitting, I go back to the instructions to the people that made it and I go, okay, if I go A to B, can I tell you, if it ain't working like you thought it was going to work, you need to get back to the one that created you. Because you're not living for tomorrow. You're not promised tomorrow. You're living for eternity. You're living for eternity. And if anything that reminded me, man, it was that. It was, wow, this is real. And I pastor for a living, so I've seen the youngest of young die, and I've stood at the head of a casket of a child. And I've stood at the head of a casket of a 90-year-old, and some of the times, like, people will be like, well, what would you ask God? Man, I got questions for days. I got questions. But it doesn't change who created me, who designed me, and it gets me back to the point, dude, we were created for eternity. We were created to spend forever with God. We're not promised tomorrow, so we take advantage of today in preparation for where we will be. Because one day, we're all going to stand before God. Every one of us. We got to be ready for that moment. And the biggest thing, like I was worried about, like here's the conversation my wife and I had. Do you know if you knew Jesus? Like that was like our biggest thing. You know, we were wrestling with that. And so like I come with urgency because of stuff like that. Because I'm like literally like, do you know Jesus? Like, man, that's what I want for you. Like not a game. Not playing church. Like if you want to know who you are, find out who he is. It'll change you. I'm not talking about, oh, well, like tomorrow will be better. I'm talking about like it will change you. Because that's where everything starts. It starts with Him. And so that's what I want for you. I want you to know Him. So I know,